Vernomatic Productions.
Are you ready?
Live from the Metal Mayhem Studios in Rochester, New York.
We are gold. We are gold.
And heard around the world by metalheads just like you. This is Metal Mayhem ROC.
Heavy metal music.
Your weekly dose of metal music, interviews, album reviews, news, and more. Want to be part of the show? Send us a message through our website, metalmayhemroc.com, or hit us up on Facebook and Twitter. Search Metal Mayhem ROC, a proud member of the Pantheon podcast team.
It's getting nice and heavy.
Now, welcome our hosts, John the Vernomatic Verno, and direct from New Jersey, Metal Walt.
Good evening, everybody. As always, new content drops every Thursday night. As we navigate our way through the dog days of summer, we continue our celebration of Metallica. Tonight, we welcome American filmmaker and friend of the show, Adam Dubin. Now, Adam, a native New Yorker, went to NYU and graduated from the film program in the 80s. Actually was a roommate of Rick Rubin back in his freshman year. Got involved with the Beastie Boys in the ground level and directed those first two killer videos, Fight for Your Right to Party and No Sleep Till Brooklyn. Early 90s, got involved with Metallica as a director, did the documentary A Year in the Life of Metallica, was behind the lens for the music video Nothing Else Matters, and has been doing projects with the band ever since. In 2019, Adam released the documentary Murder in the Front Row, the history of the San Fran thrash scene from the 80s. This was kick-ass. It chronicles all those bands in the scene up at the Waldorf and Ruthie's Inn, you know, bands like Slayer and Exodus and Testament. Well, this documentary, Murder in the Front Row, he catches up with everyone that was there, the people that owned the bars, the girls that used to help the bands by feeding them, driving them around, letting them sleep at their house, to just the whole Frisco scene. It's awesome. Again, that's Murders in the Front Row. So Adam's going to join us in just a minute. But first, we want to give a big horns up to all our new friends in the community that found us via the Pantheon Music Podcast Network. Now, Metal Mayhem's been around 4.5 years, well over 160 episodes. We have a YouTube channel. We have a Monday night live radio show on Metal Devastation Radio. So there's a lot going up here. So all our new friends that found us on Pantheon, we invite you to get up to our website, metalmayhemroc.com. Join up and get our newsletter. Our weekly newsletter gives you updates on new podcasts, notifications for the radio show, everything that we got going on here. While you're there, do us a solid. Subscribe to the podcast. Check out some past episodes. Last week we had Stefan Chirarzi and Renee Richardson of the Metallica Report on. 2 weeks ago, we did a recap of Metal Walt and my trip to New Jersey for the 72 season shows. Bastardane a week before then. Witch Slayer before then. So there's tons of content up there. Welcome to the community. We've been waiting for you. So that's about it. Let's get into this Adam Dubin interview. For my co-host, Metal Walt, I'm John the Vernomatic Verno, and this is Metal Mayhem ROC. Well, today we got a day off. We got a friend. He goes by the name of Adam Dubin. Been doing rock and roll videos, documentaries for well over 35 years. Adam, welcome to Metal Mayhem ROC. How are you?
Happy to be here. Metal ups to you.
I'd like to introduce you to my co-host, Metal Walt from New Jersey. And right off the bat, he's going down heavy metal memory lane.
Adam, what's up, brother? I'm a Jersey guy right over the river. Jumped on similar grounds for many, many years, I'm sure. Nice to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you. I'm sure we headbanged at the same show at some point.
Absolutely. So John and I we were talking earlier, and he says, you're going to love this guy, Adam, man. He's like you. He's a New York guy, a Jersey guy. He loves to talk. He's passionate about it. And I started thinking about my experiences growing up as a kid or a teenager. And I think you and I are about the same age range. I'm 53. And I said, it's no secret that you studied at NYU, but I wanted to take a little walk down New York City Village heavy metal memory lane and remind you of some of the great places that we probably walked, right? So for me, I took a train, the PATH train, the Harrison PATH train, and I got over to 33rd Street, came up to the top of 8th Street Station, and actually the 9th Street Station, stopped at Bella's Pizza, got a big sloppy pizza sandwich, and turned around to 9th Street. And then the first thing you did on 9th Street was go record shopping, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, all these record shops, this one, It's Only Rock and Roll, and Bleecker Bob's, Rat Cage Records, Sounds. You would just kind of make these rounds of all these record stores rather. And I mean, it's not to name drop, but you know who my roommate was at college, so it was like when I met Rick Rubin, I mean, I used to look through these stores before, but now like it was like we kind of had a purpose, and I would go through and I was learning about all these new bands and everything. But Rick was he was that next step, evolved in terms of he was making records. Even by the time I met him, I was 18, he was 19, and he was making, pressing vinyl, making records for his band Hose. And he would go around the, kind of the East Village going, hey, I've got to check my inventory. And we would go around store to store. 99 Records, that's another one, Ed Bauman's 99 Records. and we would just go place to place. And there you are. I mean, any Second Coming Records, sure. And, he would go in and like literally, physically count the number of units in there, and then go up to the front and like ask for payment. If he had dropped off 10 and there was only 5 there now, he would say, okay, someone bought 5 of my records. That was the arrangement. Very simple, but it was like, he wasn't the only guy doing it. There was that's how, do-it-yourself punk was done. And again, Rick being so progressive as he was, I think he saw the same thing in hip hop before a lot of other people saw it, for what it was, which was essentially do-it-yourself music, but African-American version of that, coming out of the Bronx, but certainly other places, and people just pressing up vinyl and making their own, records and selling them, because basically, labels that supported R&B were not supporting rap in those very early days. So again, it was sort of, he just recognized this for being the punk rock way that it was,
Guys, let me ask you, these stores looked very small.
New York City, that space is at a premium. So I mean, Bleecker Bob's there. It's in the bottom of a tenement building. So's these other ones. So it's, the aisles are kind of tight. Everything's stacked up and dusty, but it's that's how it was in New York. But certainly, I've been to vinyl shops, in New Jersey, where and many other parts of the country, they're not quite as packed tight like that. There's a little more room for some other stuff going on too.
Yeah, I think this is Bleecker Bob's. I always remember because it was the pilgrimages. Again, you went down A Street, you went to It's Only Rock and Roll. And John, for your knowledge, It's Only Rock and Roll was up on the 2nd floor. So you had to go up these stairs. Yeah. And this was like the starting place where I caught my infatuation for live bootleg cassettes. It was the place to go where you would see a show, let's say at the Ritz or wherever later, and you go down there, and for $10 you get half of that show. But that was always what they did. They fucked with you. They would give half the show and then make you come back another later and buy the end. And the funny part was, for some reason, they always cut songs out, and it just pissed me off. But this place was classic. You had Revolver Records right down the street. And then as you went around Washington Square Park, you went over to Bleecker Bob's. And Adam, I know you know this, but I think Bleeckers was, to me, I was looking for the metal, but I think Bleecker Bob's had more of that rock, punk, Ramones kind of feel to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was going to Bleecker Bob's when I was going into the city. When I started going into the city as as a like middle teenager when I could take the train on my own. I was going there, and it was the late 70s, and so you could kind of get, it was very punk back then. I mean, they were selling records, that you could find nowhere. Wayne County and the Electric Chairs, just really, like Lower East Side punk stuff that I thought was cool. Ramones, of course, being descriptive of all of that, but really singles by all those guys. And there wasn't a lot of record shops in a lot of other parts of town or certainly other on Long Island that you were going to ever find something like that,
Yeah, I have a question, Adam. Just like I was always curious, what came first? Were you into filmmaking and then you kind of got your love for metal, or did the metal come first and then the filmmaking, or were they both mutually exclusive?
I fell in love with filmmaking at about 11 years old or something. I picked up a movie camera that was in the house, and I started filming stuff with it. Had no idea prior to that you could do something like that. Once I did, I started making films, Super 8 and everything. But what started to happen is I became like as soon as I became like a teenager, I mean, I liked music, but then rock music hit me, and it hit me, one, because I could listen to like FM rock radio, but really in a major way was seeing some kid that young. But what there was I went down to the movie theater, and in re-release was the Woodstock movie. And I saw that was, at the time I just thought it was great. But in hindsight, over these years, I've realized that was a bit of a turning point for me, seeing Woodstock, seeing those performances, which, again, I've always said this, that the reason Woodstock was an important festival, but the reason it's important and it's remembered is because somebody was there with a movie camera. And because of that, we now have it forever. There was other bigger festivals, but nobody was there documenting it. In this case, they were. So it was that combining of film and music that really hit me and made a difference. Now, going along, I wasn't going around filming bands yet, but I was making films because I thought at that time I'd be a narrative filmmaker, and I'm doing like whatever short film stories I'm doing. But when I got to NYU, MTV was maybe a year old at that point. So it was not like this. It was coming up, but it was not yet the dominant force that it became. That took another year or so because everybody didn't have it yet. It was not everywhere. And so, but what was MTV if not the combining of film and music in this way? And suddenly bands that may not ever have broke out, suddenly they broke out because of MTV. And so suddenly the whole landscape changed. And I was right there for that. And so suddenly I started thinking about my filmmaking in a whole nother way. Like, oh, I can do this. This is something that like I can make film and video. So, I mean, I loved it. I dove right into that stuff. And metal kind of, I always went for heavier music. And I loved metal. It wasn't metal. I mean, it's hard rock. I mean, what I was listening to, because it was a little slightly before exactly metal. But I loved Led Zeppelin and all that kind of stuff. But what happened is metal was rising. Also, hip hop was rising, and I was in New York, so I was much more, I would say, at that moment in time, into hip hop stuff, or I was in that world a little bit more, and I, checking out metal and stuff, but hip hop was just right there in my face because of where I was, in New York City.
When MTV was coming around, 80, 81, the interesting thing with that was the conceptual videos really blew up once the medium expanded. But some of those late 70s, you had the concert videos, but then you had some of those really early conceptual videos, like Judas Priest had some, and Rush had some in like 77, 78.
Yeah.
Were you able to see any of that stuff? Because back then there was pre-MTV. You had Don Kirshner's Rock Concert. You had some of those other shows on after Saturday Night Live on Saturday nights. But what was your first exposure on conceptual pieces?
you saw, I mean, I definitely sought that stuff out. I loved Don Kirshner's rock concert. I loved the Midnight Special show, and because you could see bands on it. And, that was my first time of seeing a lot of bands. And a lot of times the bands, of course, wouldn't actually be on the show. They would send at the time they were just called promotional clips. But so I mean, I got my first look at a lot of things, but the thing I sought out, like a lot of people of our generation, was Kiss. Because when Kiss happened, I was right there. I was exactly the right age when Kiss Alive came out. And that grabbed me like nothing else. Same story as a lot of people, just looking at that front cover, which was like nothing you ever saw before. Kids in Cobo Arena and or Cobo Hall, wherever it was, and those kids at the poster, and feeling like it generated exactly the feeling that they wanted. Was something's going on and you want to get in on it. You're missing it, but you want to get in on this. And those kids with the self-made Kiss poster, that's the first time I ever saw that. And I was just like, this is amazing. And I mean, to my father's, forever credit, I wanted to see Kiss. And at 12 years old, he took me to go see Rock and Roll Over Tour.
Nice.
So I was just like,
jeez.
Yeah, I know. I was like, that was my first thing. It'd be a long time till I could see any of the concerts because my father was done. He was one and out. And but that was quite something to see. Yeah, I mean, I was all in. So it was like what I sought out, as you guys probably know, was you start looking to see, can you see Kiss anywhere? Can you see some videos? And so sometimes they would be on one of those late night shows. Sometimes something, the Paul Lynde special that one of the first appearances. We all were waiting. We were hoping that Phantom of the Park was going to be amazing, but we were kind of like, I don't think that's amazing. But a lot of times those promotional clips of Kiss were, you'd see them on some of these shows. So yeah, that was important to me prior to like MTV ever becoming a thing.
And I would say too, on that point, Adam, the Village Voice, like for me, that was a big way to find out about concerts, right? We couldn't get it in Jersey. So you'd have to, again, do your pilgrimage to New York City, grab that free paper. There's an example of an old one in the red box. And you'd have to look up and see who were coming to all your favorite arenas and clubs. But going back to the topic on Woodstock, a couple things here. I was always infatuated, and I'm sure you will, and I'm curious about your experiences here. You did the record shops, but right across the street was the elusive Electric Lady Studios that it's still, to me, this day is like, look at it. It's brick. It's got this weird front. You can't really see it, but like these legendary people, Hendrix, Kiss, how many others were there? Did you ever step foot in there for any professional reasons?
I didn't. I mean, I'd walk by it all the time. There was a store next to it, I believe, called Flip that had like kind of cool rock and roll-ish clothing and everything. But that kind of stuff was all up and down that block in that area. And, you'd walk by it and being in the Village, we all knew that was Hendrix's place and everything. But of course, that history had taken place over a decade before. But I finally got to go in there in, it would be probably in 1986. And when Rick Rubin was making the Electric album for The Cult, and that was being recorded there. And that was when, those guys, Ian and Billy Duffy came over from England and they were working on it. And there's actually a bit of a backstory. Rubin we were going around scouting locations for what would be the Run DMC movie, Tougher Than Leather. And while we're scouting locations, Rubin's constantly got like I was driving him around and we'd go to one place, look at that location, go to another. And in between, my car had a cassette player. So he was constantly shuffling cassettes through it. So I'm hearing like mixes of what would be License to Ill, the songs on License to Ill as he's working on them from Chungking. But the other thing that came in, he goes, check this out. He goes, do you know this band, The Cult? And I did know them. I knew She Sells Sanctuary. He plays me a song from, I forget which one. And it sort of sounds like the way the sound is on She Sells Sanctuary. It was like that kind of Brit pop kind of thing going on, a lot of shimmery sounds and everything. And he goes, they want me to do something with them. And I'm like, oh, that'd be cool. Then we're just talking about it a little bit. Well, sometime later, we're still in pre-production for the movie. And now Billy Duffy's hanging out and around, and Rick is like talking to him, and there's like a lot of conversations and stuff. Billy's young, he was young then, and he definitely had a couple drinks too at the time. Mm-hmm. And then it was like they're in the studio, and there's Ian, and there's Billy, there's the rest of the guys and everything, and Rubin is, I hear what he's doing, and he's essentially turning it into, he's taking away all the shimmery stuff, all that jingle jangle stuff, and it's AC/DC, and it's basically the electric record that we know it to be now, and it's cool. And it was, so I would have things to do. I was working for Rick, and I would go down to Electric Ladyland Studios pretty often, in and out of there, just so I could update him on something, get some information, bring him something, whatever. So yeah, I heard that thing as they were working on it.
That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Is it as glamorous as it seems, or is it, a stall that doesn't work, or a faucet that has no hot water?
It's actually kind of small. There were bigger rooms in the city. I mean, there was by that point, but it seemed like, I mean, it was cool. It had the history and everything. I mean, all you had to think is that Hendrix recorded there, and that kind of, and the album's named the same thing. I mean, it's just, right. It's really cool. I'm sure it's they updated it a lot, but it was, it's small. The lounge there was like small as I remember it. And I don't remember what worked or didn't. What I remember, of course, is, what's impressive is like the gold records on the wall, which are like kind of everything that you guys and me love, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, yeah. Because all through from the late 60s, all through the 70s, and this is now into the 80s that I was there, they're making these great records there. So all that stuff in the 70s that went down there, including, I think Kiss, when they were Wicked Lester, I'm pretty sure they recorded there. And I don't know if they even recorded any of the first Kiss stuff there, but I think I remember that those guys that's where they were recording. It was just one of the good studios.
Now, you mentioned that Rick Rubin was your roommate. Was he your freshman roommate? Like you're both incoming freshmen, and this was before he was Rick Rubin that we know?
Well, I'll tell you who he was. I was a freshman. He was a sophomore. So he was in his second year. And he, he certainly, that's the room, that photograph in the lower left. That's they brought him back there for some documentary project. And he kind of knew the ropes of being in the dorm. I was as new as could be. And but remember that, we were only roommates for that first year, my first year, his second year, but we stayed friends. I mean, we kind of liked each other. And so, even though he kind of moved around the dorm a little bit and was roommates with some other people, not people that kind of went on to do anything in the business. They were just, people that were whatever, somebody, a finance student or whatever. But when I met him, he already had formed Def Jam Records, although it was not to put out hip hop yet. It was to put out his punk records.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Because we were a little confused because I knew Def Jam, and then there was Def American, or was that a subsidiary? Was that the rock label? What was that all about? So Rick had Def Jam Records. He had formed it at least, I believe, in 1982, because it was there by the time I met him in the fall of 82, and he showed it to me. And it's amazing. He already had the logo that and the thing with the tone arm and everything. It was already set back then for punk records. And so he had that in, I think it was 1985, a few years later. He had by this point met Russell Simmons, and they formed up, still use the name Def Jam, but like we're now partners in Def Jam. And they made records for a while. And then what you have is the kind of, the records were successful, obviously. Yep. And then what you have is the divergence of taste
between these two. They weren't enemies or anything, but they just were like, Russell was very interested in making R&B records, which Rubin was not interested in. Like Russell clearly was thinking about like Motown and Stax and wanting to go that direction of record making. Rubin was not interested in that. He brought in stuff like Slayer, which Russell didn't understand, and things like that. And, you know, Beastie Boys, obviously they got, but it just was like kind of guys who came together at the right moment, worked together, and then divergent tastes. So Rubin left Def Jam, just walked away, left it, goes to the West Coast and forms Def American. And then he basically makes an output deal with Geffen. And then he just goes and signs and puts out all these metal bands that he was liking. And so you start having Trouble and Slayer, of course, goes with him. And oh man, we got Wolfsbane and Danzig, of course, the Four Horsemen, all this great kind of more metal stuff that Russell never would have kind of gotten around to.
Great story.
It's a great story. Adam, you know, speaking about the worlds that started colliding in that early 80s of rock and rap, I mean, it's no secret here that this is one of your big works of art. I'd love to go back a little bit and hear some of the stories about these videos. But, you know, another point is Daryl McDaniels from Run DMC, I don't know if you know this, but he's got a metal side project band. And he was able to play a little club called Dingbats in Jersey at the end of April, and I went to see the show. It was cool, number one, but I got to talk to him about it, and we're going to eventually get him on our show. But, man, he's all into metal. Like, he's not a guy that just claims to say, oh, I'll wear an AC/DC or a Metallica T-shirt, and I'm going to be cool about it. This guy knows his shit, man. So I know those worlds have grown a long time for a long period of time. But anyway, let's go into the Beastie stuff. Like, where were he shot? Like, what were these days like? How'd Kerry come in?
Yeah, all right. Well, Kerry's the second part of it. The first part is making Fight for Your Right to Party, which came first. So the quicker version of it is that the Rick Rubin is directing the Run DMC movie Tough in the Leather. He is up to his eyeballs in directing that movie. It's all in. It's very time consuming. And at the same moment, they dropped the Beastie Boys' first single, Fight for Your Right to Party. But nobody outside of maybe a few people in New York or something had seen these guys or knew what they looked like. Few people saw them on the Madonna tour the year before, but they were booed off the stage, you know, so they were not memorable. Nobody really cared. So all of a sudden this single drops, and any city that started to play it, whatever the rock station was, it lit up the phones. Nobody had ever heard anything like that before. So it was like all of a sudden they needed a music video in 2 weeks for MTV. Rubin probably would have directed that video had he not been like snowed under with directing Run DMC. So he turns to Ric Menello, my co-director and co-writer, and he says, you're going to direct the video. And the Beastie Boys know Ric Menello, and he was like the guru of film. He was a film student from NYU, about 10 years older than me and Rick. And so Menello is like, all right, I'll direct it, but if Dubin will do it with me, because Menello knew a lot about film, but he had never actually directed or produced anything before, and I had. So I was like, I'm on it. The Beasties knew me by that point, and so it was like they were like, fine. They really just wanted to get a music video on MTV because MTV was holding a space in heavy rotation, which was like God at the time. That was like it. So we go off, we write a music video. We didn't have much money, and we wrote this kind of series of gags that were like the Beastie Boys crashed the party, and then, you know, kind of these gags happen and everything. They were totally down for it. It kind of showed who they were in a fun way and a cool way. And you know, whatever. I mean, as I think back on it, I mean, it was just like a race to get the thing done. It was, you know, we weren't thinking about art or is this great or is this going to be cool. We just thought, well, it should be pretty cool, but like we don't have much money, so just invite all your friends and like we'll have this party and we'll throw pies at the end. And then for each of the lyrics, we kind of worked out some gags. All right, so that was cool. We got it done in the 2-week time period, got it up on MTV, and voila. I mean, powered by a great song, it became a great music video that people really enjoyed. So now America knew who the Beastie Boys were. Even the world could see who the Beastie Boys were, and that kind of captured a piece of their character.
Was that their personality? Was that the type of people they were in reality? Fun guys, silly, drinking beers and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, they were even sometimes a little more serious than that. And sometimes they were up for causing a bit of trouble, though. They were punk rockers. I remember them from the Lower East Side and from CBGBs and stuff for years before that. And they were just a bunch of young high school kids who were up for causing a bit of trouble. You know what I mean? Not terrible trouble. They weren't awful. But they were, they would. I mean, they weren't bullies. They weren't walking around town beating up on, ganging up on people. But they were like, whatever. They were definitely the kind of guys that were messing stuff up. I mean, one memory that I have very distinct from the dorm was when they started to visit Rubin in the dorm. Rubin and I were not roommates at this point, but we were friends, and they were always coming in, and they were either them or their kind of cohorts were tagging up the elevators, tagging everything up. But that was a serious thing in NYU. Like Rubin, who signed them in, he could get thrown out of the dorm. If you sign somebody into the dorm, you're vouching for them. So whatever they do in the dorm, you're good for it. You can get in trouble. So they were messing stuff up, and I was asked a number of times about, if I knew something about that, and I was like, no, I don't know anything. And I tell Rick that they're looking for you, man. You better, keep a lid on it, because they were trying to recognize some of the signs that the not gang signs, but just stuff that the Beasties were like scrawling all over the dorm and the elevators. So I mean, they were that kind of kids, you know what I mean? They maybe some light vandalism here or there, but nothing any of us didn't get up to at some point or another. And so they were, that kind of, the video kind of, they were all in on that characterization. They were, you got to remember, the Fight for Right to Party was supposed to be the anti-frat boy song. Now, interestingly, somewhere along the line, I wouldn't say in the music video, it turned around. It probably turned around somewhere when they went on tour and they had the girl in the cage and they're pouring beer on her. They since disavowed all that, but it's like at the time they that was at the point when they became what they were spoofing in a sense. But the music video, we didn't do that. Even in the No Sleep Till Brooklyn, we didn't, we had a model in there, but we weren't pouring beer on her. She was just a girl dancing at the rock club. It's like, so they were fun. I mean, the Beastie Boys were fun and funny. They were smart guys, which is of course borne out later by the fact that, look at all they did after Def Jam. I always say that that's really why they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's not because of Fight for Your Right to Party. It's because of, you can't even say a rock and roll act or even a hip hop act. They were everything, They were the whole package, and they could make their own videos and produce their own records. So once Fight for Right to Party was successful, the record company was really happy, and they were like, well, we're just going to do the same thing again. And the next single was No Sleep Till Brooklyn. And so they were like, okay, same thing. There was a little bit more money now, but it was the same idea. It was like a kind of a gag fest, but this time at like in a kind of heavy metal show. So if you remember, the original version of No Sleep Till Brooklyn starts with a preamble thing, one of those, like, just like the way Fight starts with like a little sketch beforehand, and then it starts. Mm-hmm. So Ric Menello, my co-writer, co-director, plays the manager of the rock club, and the Beastie Boys show up and they go, "Hey man, we're the band," and he goes, "Band, where's your instruments?" And then he breaks the record over their heads, and then they show up in their heavy metal attire. But that was kind of a dig against club owners and people in the metal community who didn't get it. And like, I want to kind of, you guys understand, because you guys were there, and if you just remember back that like, oh, if you don't play an instrument, like having a DJ on stage with you is not an instrument, and it's really just like, it's not worthy, or because people are expecting musicianship on the level of, I don't know, Rush or something, and so therefore this is not worthy. And the Beastie Boys wanted to take a shot at that, basically, that attitude. And so that was like, yes, it's funny that we opened that way, but it kind of had some real teeth to it, we just start up doing gags, and it's fun, and we tried to get as ridiculous as we could. And just remember, Spinal Tap already existed for like a couple of years in the world, but so you have to sort of out Spinal Tap to spoof anything. So that's why we put them in a suit of armor. And I mean, it's just, it's just silliness and fun. But they were up for the game. I mean, they wanted to do stuff, and Yauk was totally up for machine gunning the Marshall speakers, and it was just playing with that. Now, Kerry King comes into.
Now, before we go into the Kerry King part, my interpretation of the Beastie Boys was they were fun. They were like good buddies goofing around, sort of like in a good way, immature frat boys, even though they're against, the whole frat thing. That's what I always got out of the Beastie Boys.
And I think white kids to like rap, right? Like there was none of that stuff before. Like you could be cool with rap and be like, oh my God, look at these three white guys, right? From New York City,
Yeah.
Well, you just hit it exactly on the head. That's exactly what it was. It was okay for white kids to rap. The genre was big enough. I mean, as we see, it's become like a world music. I mean, there's rap in every single language now. You know what I mean? It's because it's expressing feeling, a lot of it rage or at injustice in every culture now that supports it. But what's interesting about that, and this is props back to Rubin already knew this. He knew it when I met him in 1982. He was telling me that like there's going to be white rappers. He absolutely knew it because he just understood it for what it was. That it was essentially punk music. There was not a difference. I still thought there was a difference. I had to learn. He was already there. But the real credit on that goes to Russell Simmons, who when in breaking the Beastie Boys, he as soon as they started actually doing the rap thing, and they admit themselves in their book and everything that they felt they were like worried about being inauthentic, they were kind of worried, like, can we do this, and he took them right up to the hardcore, hip hop clubs in the Bronx and threw them in at the deep end, because it was kind of, if they could pull it off there. I mean, Russell actually said this quote that if they weren't taken seriously by the black audience, then all they'd ever be is fake white rappers.
There you go.
His thought was, and to his great credit, was to break them at black clubs. Now, of course, he could team them with some of his acts and everything, but in the end run, three white boys had to get out there on stage and do it. And we know from like the Apollo that the audience there will not tolerate, posers or any more than obviously our friends in the metal community will tolerate posers. So it's like they did it. You know what I mean? That's what, and of course, blazed the trail for every single white rapper that could ever be after it. Eminem, on and on,
Yeah, Macklemore, all that. It's true. Kerry King, how'd that get involved?
Okay. Look, Kerry played the song like No Sleep Till Brooklyn. It needed a heavy metal guitar solo. So at this point, Slayer was under contract already, and Rubin liked that kind of cross-pollinating with label mates and everything. They weren't friends or anything. It's not like Slayer and the Beasties were friends. There was none of that. But it was just like, in the studio, he got Kerry to play the solo, which is the solo we know. And then it came to the music video. And Rubin was very adamant about wanting Kerry to be in the music video. The Beasties were not so much into that. They didn't care so much about having Kerry. They surely didn't want to be upstaged in their own video. I mean, remember, they're still pretty new to the game. They're exactly one music video in at this point. You know what I mean? It's like going to film No Sleep Till Brooklyn. So it's not like, their career is assured at this point. They've got one hit. You know what I mean? That's it. So now it's like, wait a minute, there's this other guy now who's going to be in, and he's going to get this moment of a blazing guitar solo. You know what I mean? So they were the Beasties were very skeptical about that, and they weren't that into it. And, we could have like done gags, and the idea had come up to have a chimp come in and play wacky kind of video. So there was a chimp at the time. This chimp would be on David Letterman from time to time and everything. His name's Zippy the Chimp. And
I
remember Zippy the Chimp? Yeah. And he could roller skate too. He'd come out on roller skates and everything. He was just on a bunch of shows and stuff. whatever. He was a thing of the moment. And so we called up to see about getting Zippy the Chimp, and that was the idea. And the Beasties were like kind of okay with that, like they'd be in the background. Zippy the Chimp comes in with a guitar, and we called up and we got a hold of the trainer and everything. And that was a great idea, but Zippy the Chimp cost $1,500. And so I still remember it to this day. That's because $1,500 was like way more dollars than anybody else on that entire video was getting by a lot. And so Rubin nixed that idea. And so then the idea was like, all right, there's no Zippy the Chimp. Well, it can't just be Kerry because that's upstaging. So it's like, all right, what if we get a gorilla suit? Because a gorilla suit rents for $50. Well, $50 is more like the kind of budget we had. So I was like, now, you guys have seen enough Three Stooges and Abbott and Costello's and all that stuff to know that a gorilla suit is just funny because it's there. I mean, a guy shows up in a gorilla suit, it's already good. So I just was like, well, if anybody's wearing the gorilla suit, I'm wearing the gorilla suit. There's not going to be another person in the gorilla suit if there's a gorilla suit. So I'm like, I put on the gorilla suit. I got out there and I had the guitar and everything. And I just was like, come out, just do the first bar or so of the song and then get shoved out of the way by Kerry, who does what Kerry King does. So I could say that I definitely felt the nails in my back as he shoved me out of the way. So those nails are for real, man. So it was like kind of a compromise that proved to be the best of everything,
I have a quick comment somewhere in Rubin's thinking and philosophy, because obviously seems to be 3 steps ahead, was the including of Kerry King sort of the same thing as like an Eddie Van Halen on Beat It, where they're trying to appease 2 different types of music crowds, because, hey, I was there in 82 and 83 when the girl next door said, hey, your guy Eddie Van Halen's on my Michael Jackson album. I'm like, what? But like, you know what I'm saying? 5 years later, it's the same thing.
I don't know. All right. I mean, you got to remember, here's the guy who gave us Walk This Way. And it was not, it's like Steve Tyler and Joe Perry they weren't really aware of rap, and Run DMC were pretty ambivalent about, doing anything with Aerosmith. They didn't see it either. And so, I'm saying all through, this has already been acknowledged in like numerous interviews. Rubin's the one who saw it and brought them together. So I think he felt it was, I don't think he felt it was so much like Eddie Van Halen on a Michael Jackson track, as much as it was much more in his mind of I think recognizing, and on this, again, he is 3 steps ahead, that the fan of the Beastie Boys could also be a fan of Slayer, and it is not mutually exclusive or anything like, oh, you're a rap fan and this guy's a metal fan. Nope. He saw it as that kid in middle America could be a fan of both those things. And it's just, he felt like any fan of a Slayer could just as much dig that Beastie track. And I think, history has certainly proven that out too.
It certainly has. And we all know that metalheads are very territorial.
Yeah.
We're talking with Adam Dubin. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, the 80s come to the 90s, things get heavy, and the real powerhouse metalers get involved. We'll be right back.
Metal Mayhem ROC.
So the 80s are ending, and it's time to move into the 90s, and metal's in its fullest force of popularity. You obviously have an enormous relationship with Metallica, and you've done so much amazing work that we couldn't cover it in an hour episode. Adam, just off the bat, talk about the Nothing Else Matters video. I mean, John and I were looking at this stat that popped up on, I think it's your Facebook, that video's seen, 1 billion views?
Yeah, apparently. I mean, I picked it up off of Lars Ulrich, his I don't know, his feed somewhere on Twitter or Instagram or something, when he picked it up, that there was 1 billion views, and he drew this mind blown thing on it. And yeah, it's pretty mind blowing. I guess it is, just on YouTube or whatever, that's been viewed 1 billion times. That's pretty wild. Apparently that's also some, rare territory, but very cool. It's nice that, people keep finding that track and enjoy it.
This is the first Metallica track, I think, where they started crossing over, right? You get into the Black Album, and this becomes maybe the third single or so. I don't remember, but you can't call this like a ballad or anything, but this is their softer side, which was the first of its kind. But look what it did to their career, right? I mean, just that in of itself is an amazing piece that they stepped out of their own comfort zone.
Yeah, as you pointed out in the beginning, the 80s turned to the 90s. In 1990, I'd been making music videos for a number of years now. It's after the Beastie Boys. By the way, my Beastie Boy career was just those 2 videos with them, and then they went off to the West Coast, and I, other than seeing them once in a while, I had no further contact with them. But I was making music videos, and one day get a call that Metallica, who I did not know yet, were going to go into the studio to do whatever their next record's going to be. Nobody knows yet. It's just the 5th Metallica record. That's all. And, they may want to film stuff. Would you like to talk with them about it? Oh, sure. I'd love to talk with them about it. So we knew some people in common by this point. I mean, I'd been doing a lot of work for Danzig and stuff like this. So there was, I was probably going to meet and talk to them at some point. But anyway, I met them on this day. It was very clear from get-go that like Lars was interested in filming this, and James was not. And kind of just showed them what I could do. I said, let me try it and I'll film a little bit. And, I kind of thought, well, this is probably going to amount to nothing. It was nice to meet the guys in Metallica for a minute. And at the time I met them, it was just Lars and James there. And 2 weeks later or something, I got a phone call. Yeah, they want you to come film, but it's probationary. If they don't like it, they're going to throw you out. The whole thing is supposed to take only 4 months. It took 10 to make that record. But it was, I just started doing what I do. I just started filming and documenting. This now was much closer to what I felt about Woodstock, which was, this thing that inspired me, and also other great documentaries by the documentarian D.A. Pennebaker, who really is the godfather of all kind of rock documentary, great cinematographer. And, I'm filming 16. I pushed for this to film 16 millimeter film because I wanted it to look classic. To their great credit, Metallica sprung for the many more dollars that it is to shoot on film. And what we have is this tremendous record of a document of them creating what turned out to be the biggest album of their career, and indeed one of the biggest albums of all time. It's up there in like Back in Black territory, and whatever the most classic rock albums are, and everything like that. It's up there with like, the Hotel Californias and the Stairway to Heaven, everything that's huge. That's where that record is. But they didn't know it at the time. I mean, they were just making this record, but we could hear it. The few of us who were in the studio could hear like, oh my God, this, like I even knew, like, as I'm listening to these songs go down, like, yeah, this is not just the next Metallica record. This is pretty epic. I mean, we hear like Enter Sandman coming together. You're like, oh, okay, wait a minute. This is like, I mean, I was like, I think it's good, but I'm like, no, this is really good. So the band, finishes the record. The song just, and you guys remember these days when Enter Sandman comes out, followed by the next single, Unforgiven. I mean, it was just devouring rock radio and kind of bringing in new fans. And then new fans were going back and discovering the older records, which were also great. And were kind of like, I think, what was like a very, on the edge thrash record at the time. But I mean, if in 91 or 92, you're a metal fan and you really love Metallica, then I think it's probably a great discovery to go back and find Ride the Lightning in there someplace, or Master of Puppets sitting there waiting for you. So I got a call. They wanted to try to use the footage that we'd shot for what would be the third music video, which off the album, and the third single was Nothing Else Matters. And the idea was obviously it's a kind of a love song without saying the word love in it.
Yeah.
But it's, and it's, I don't know if it's a ballad. It's, to me, there's a lot of hard rock songs that build like that. But at the time they just wanted it to, they didn't want to do a concept video because that would have been difficult and they and also expensive, by the way. And they'd spent all this money shooting this stock footage. So I think Lars and Peter Mensch were like, yeah, let's give it a shot. So they gave me an editing budget. I went away for a couple of weeks. And I remember I was not home at the time, and I wish to hell that I'd kept. Remember when answering machines had little tapes that you put in? Nobody thought to keep these things. But I get this. I was out. I mean, who knows when? And Lars was calling from someplace in the world. He would call it odd hours. I mean, really odd hours. Like they were touring the world. So I'd get phone calls about stuff at 2 a.m, 3 a.m, waking me up because he's on the other side of the planet. But we'd have to work. And he left some message, and it was like, woo, you did it. They were really thrilled. And we finished up, that then you go on online, you actually finish the music video, you make your final cuts on it. And boom, there it came out in early 1992, the third music video off the Black Album, Nothing Else Matters, and supporting a tremendous song. And, as Metallica songs go, it's certainly the most accessible song. I mean, even for people who are not heavy metal people, certainly accessible to people that might not listen to any other Metallica song, but would listen to that one. So I think that being the case, it certainly has racked up a lot of listens and a lot of views, and it's pretty cool to be a part of that. And it's cool because as you watch that music video, you can actually see how a song is created a little bit, how a recording process works.
So when you were working with this song in particular, were you also documenting what would become a year and a half in the life of Metallica? Was this all happening at the same time?
Yes, a good question. It was. So I'm at the time, we had filmed obviously the studio part because that was done and the record was out. But they were, when I started editing Nothing Else Matters, they were embarking on the very beginning of what would become the 3-year tour for the Black Album. Yeah. I remember Jason Newsted telling me when I was interviewing a couple of years ago that he celebrated 3 birthdays on the Black Album tour.
Oh my God!
So that's pretty epic. And so he, what they did was there was a little bit of a moment in between finishing filming the making of the studio part, and it was shortly after I finished editing the music video for Nothing Else Matters that the band called up and said, okay, we want you to now come out on the road. So look at that. That's pretty good coming from, a couple of years before when they were like, we don't know if we're even like, okay, now we want you to come on the road and film the hijinks there. And that just kind of kept it going. And then, yes, to answer your question, while I was on the road actually filming the Black Album tour, I was also at the same time in the studio in Manhattan editing this whole thing. So I was editing the making of the record and then now the making of the tour simultaneously because, when you have an album, it's doing the numbers that it's doing and it's just and it sort of just keeps going. The next single after this was Wherever I May Roam. I think they kept going after that. There's still great deep songs on that. They just Sad But True is the one after that. So there you are. That's 5 singles off of an album of 12 songs. So it's like they wanted another piece of product in the stores for Christmas time 1992, and so we were on the very heavy deadline to get done the film, which you now know is a year and a half in the life of Metallica parts 1 and 2, and 1 being the making of the record, 2 being the tour. All the music videos are on there, and it just kind of encapsulates what that year and a half was like for the Metallica boys at that time.
I think I saw that tour for 3 different birthdays. I saw the first arena. I saw the outdoor tour with the Cult. You know, joking aside,
yeah,
it went on for 3.5 years. But Adam, props to you, man, because I have grown up watching this stuff. I've had the VHSs and just keep watching and watching and watching. And so needless to say, the relationship with Metallica is solidified, which goes on to this day. What other stuff? Cunning stunts. What do we have on here? Tell us about the cunning stunts.
Yeah, I mean, here's a few of the other
sessions.
There's a few other documentaries on here that I've done over the years. I'm fortunate. They remember me. They call me in for special projects when they need. They have a team of video guys with them now that's very capable. They generate a ton of social media videos, all the time from all over the world, wherever they are. But these special projects would come up. So, I mean, they, in the 90s, they did a tour whereby the stage collapses. Like it was almost an expansion of like you guys remember the tour where Doris, collapsed. Well, this was like the whole stage collapsing. And
remember it.
And so I did it. The Wayne Isham shot the live film of that, but I did the making of Cunning Stunts, and that was kind of fun to show how they pulled off all this amazing stuff night after night. And then a few years later, they go do S&M, which was the first time they decided to do the concert thing where they played with a symphony orchestra. Of course, their music being somewhat almost symphonic in certain ways lent itself to it. So that was kind of incredible. And again, Wayne Isham again shot the live show that we did in Berkeley, California, and I did the making of, so you could kind of see how that whole thing came together. Very interesting seeing Metallica work with a set of musicians are from a completely different background, are so schooled in composition and in classical music, but certainly got the feel of what Metallica was doing. So that was very neat watching that work out. Hit the Lights was a documentary of Metallica in 2012 started making a what would be a film that they were putting together. They wanted to do something narrative, but something that was kind of also a movie concert film, and because they kind of wanted to they kind of wanted to do something in 3D and like an IMAX 3D thing. So they came up with this crazy stage that was like, had a piece of staging from all of their career up to that point. At that point, they were at about a 30th anniversary mark. And so I think it kind of marked that. And again, how do you get it all done? I was filming the making of how you do the making of this incredible bit of staging that they came up with. It was done in segments because now the internet was a thing, and the idea was like, okay, before we ever put this on a DVD or anything, it's going to run on the internet. So it had to be done in episodic chunks and everything. So I think every segment was a few minutes, 5-6 minutes, and really cool stuff. The one I always remember that, I mean, I like them all, but the one that really knocks me out is they had in there a Tesla coil. Now, this is something nobody has. And they lit up the Tesla coil, shooting those electric bolts while Kirk is playing the solo in Ride the Lightning.
Right.
I have to say that as a piece of staging, I have never seen anything like that. Anybody's done. That is the most stunning thing I've ever seen, especially because what they were doing fit the music so well. So that was pretty cool.
Adam, I was, by the way, going back to the Cunning Stunts film, I was at the Garden Show in '97, pretty close up, and I fell for that. I remember being with somebody in the crowd, or my friend of mine in the audience, and they're like, "You got to go! Like, what's going on? You got to get the security guard." Like, I fell for it, but it was definitely a cool little gag that they did, and definitely something of its time. Adam, I had a question. On your website, you show some of the things that maybe are not commercially released as its own product, but like, for example, you in the Fan Cam 3, there's some footage of a Philadelphia show from '97. By any chance, was that the famous parking lot gig?
Yes, it was. That was the one.
I was at that show as well.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget. It was on a Tuesday. It was advertised on Howard Stern, and I'll never forget the morning I called in sick to work. I remember one of my buddies, this was pre-cell phone, calling me up and leaving me in on my parents' house phone, being like, "Hey, just by chance you were in work on a Monday and you were fine, and today you're sick, and Metallica's playing in Philly in a parking lot." Yeah. But,
well,
that was a totally killer game.
It was great. I remember it was really fun. Yeah, and we were filmed. I don't know if there was a film crew there or whatever, but I mean, this, what it really represents is, look, that was FanCan 3. I mean, I remember getting the call when Metallica was doing FanCan 1, which would probably go to about 95, and it just shows the connection with the fan base, even as they grew and they took their hits for like, whatever, they grew, they became everybody's thing. But they always wanted to keep that connection to their fans, which they still do to this day. And so they started coming up with something. I mean, all this was kind of pre-internet. So they made these short, small video things. They tried to do something special, and a fan can was exactly that. A can with like some things you could, you'd buy it and it'd have a shirt and a videotape, an actual VHS tape was in there, to kind of give the fans something, the true fans who were members of the fan club could like get this thing. And, I think that was kind of nice. It was a nice connection to the fans. So yes, the one you're talking about, that show became FanCan number 3.
That was awesome because I remember, again, not only it being a weird weekday afternoon in a parking lot, it was free, I just had to show up, but I remember they played a little under an hour and a half, but it was like, it wasn't your typical set list. They doing like deep tracks. And I remember them playing The Thing That Should Not Be. And I was, wow, that's what, why would they pick that song for a gig like this? And they pulled some of the, the stuff off Garage Days and stuff like that. So definitely a memorable one for me. But speaking of Garage Days, this one, another great one you were involved with. And I loved, I was watching a little bit of the video on YouTube yesterday. And a little picture in the bottom right, I found that cool, where the guys were just hanging out, and I guess they were getting prepped for filming or whatever they were doing, but they were just chilling. Talk about this whole moment in time.
Very fast moment in time. I mean, that was like something, I remember Lars saying like they again, because they did not have to write the songs are all just, things that they made, that they were covering, so they had to make just their versions of the song. That was like a record made in 3 weeks, essentially recorded in 3 weeks. And Lars was like really, happy about that, because it was like they, I think over the years, Metallica, number one, they certainly are very vocal about the bands that they like and support. I mean, that goes all the way back, and indeed in the very first days, as I kind of showed in Murder in the Front Row, they didn't have that many songs. They were doing covers of Diamond Head songs and other things. So the band definitely, has a connection with doing and interpreting material that's not their own. And I think, here they come to a record like, they obviously did the what was the 598 EP. Yeah. And then they kind of came to this portion in their world where they'd put out Load and Reload, and they wanted to have something else. And they wanted to, kind of, I guess, pay some respect to some of the music that they really enjoyed. And so they come out with this double disc of covers, and there's some great music on there that, it's fun. So it was a very fast project. It was not, it came together fast. It was recorded quickly. And then it was just like, they told me to just cut some stuff together that they were going to just put out there. So, video wise, I don't find it like a favorite work, in the sense of like, I think I could, given time, do something better and a lot closer to a year and a half in Life of Metallica. But at the time, they just wanted something out quickly. And so it at least shows what they were working on. That was the idea at the time.
Adam, before we turn the corner on this and get into the Murder in the Front Row and some of your other smaller projects, the Metallica in Antarctica, what was that all about? And give us the lowdown on that gig. It's
this band has been so amazing, and so amazing to me. And if you could pick like kind of something that stands out of out of all the incredible things that have happened that I've done with this band, if you could pick something that stands out, it's got to be going to Antarctica. But I've kind of read a lot about Antarctica, so it was like really kind of special thing. Apparently, there was a couple things going on. One, the band was on tour. They were that year in 2013. They were on tour, and they had already played all the other continents, and so like kind of this thing came. I mean, things are always coming to them. You got to understand, they're kind of, because of who they are, opportunities of various kinds on the door in the form of sending stuff to Q Prime and asking. So this came down the pike, and it was from, I believe, Coke Zero in South America. There's obviously various parts of the world where Coca-Cola is active in promotion. This was the promotion going on in South America. And it was like they decided to, say yes to this one. Coke is obviously a very well-funded company and would do things to promote. And so this was put together as a promotion funded by Coke Zero. And Coke Zero took not just Metallica to the bottom of the earth in Antarctica, but you need fans. And they took, I think it was something like 20 or 30 fan club people from South American fan clubs. And they played. Now, then all these logistics come into it. So it's like, how do you play there? First of all, you got to be by one of the bases. And in this case, they picked the Argentinian base. What things you need? You have electricity. You have these powerful satellites that can uplink it to the world. We went in December, which is the summer there of Antarctica. And then it was like, how do you do it and not disturb this pristine environment? Because that's kind of, one of the things that is sacred amongst all the research scientists working there is like to preserve the environment, to not have too much of man's footprint on this and so any more necessary. So they created something, again, another first that Metallica does. They created this geodesic dome. And so as not to have loud amps, which would certainly disturb the abundant wildlife there, they played, but people had individual headsets. And so the music was piped into the headsets. So again, myself as a documentarian, I have to kind of show how all this comes together and how they do this. And that was really incredible. And then even part of the day, I mean, it was amazing that they played. It's amazing it all worked. And also what was amazing, scientists and their families and whatever came from all over the other bases. I mean, obviously, I guess if you're at the bottom of the world, you get to know the other people around you because there's not many people. And they were coming over on snowmobiles and everything else, snow cats, and driving over. And they would, here's Metallica playing at the bottom of the world. So the scientists came in and everything. And what was interesting was watching Metallica also go explore this area. Part of the day, I'd say we were down there for like at most a couple of days, maybe 36 hours. But the guys in the band got into Zodiac boats and went with these, there's these PhD scientists that run these boats, and they take you and they can explain all about, like, they're either biologists or geologists or, but very, very smart and learned people who are studying down there, and they're and they took us and they showed us around, and it was really interesting to get that extra perspective. And I think the Metallica guys are really, that was part of it for them. It wasn't to just go there, play, and come home. It was like, what can we learn about this place? What can we do here? So that was, again, reflected in the documentary. And I guess the high point of the documentary beyond the music is that we got a very close encounter of the first kind with this pod of whales that came over and were right next to our boat. I mean, like went under our boat, could have swamped the boat, if they wanted to, but were, I guess, more peaceful and curious and just came by. It was a little bit alarming because, when you're up close, they're huge, then you realize you have no control here. Nobody does. You have to just sit and see what they're going to do,
Wow, what an experience. Yeah. And this is on it was almost like 15 years earlier, 10 years earlier, when the band was up at the top of the world on Tuck the Duck. Remember that gig?
Sponsored by another beverage company. That was Molson Ice.
Molson
Polar Ice, I think.
Was it?
Yeah. It was like whatever that I think the brew was Molson Ice, but it was the Polar Ice concept. Anyway, again, another thing that they took on, and they went to pretty much the top of the world. I mean, they weren't at the North Pole exactly, but even when we went to Antarctica, we weren't at the South Pole. We were just in the area of it. And they played this other promotional concert. This was in the very early days of the internet. That was 1995. And I remember that was one of the first things I remember streaming out into the world and like being like, oh, wow, they're doing that. And people must have been watching it on their AOL dial-up in a screen.
Yeah, right.
I remember they played with Veruca Salt.
Yeah, and Hold played. Hold was the other person there.
Yeah.
And,
I back in my archives, I still have the T-shirt.
Yeah, nice. I mean, again, I just think this band is incredible. I mean, they try to do interesting things, not all the time, just weird, interesting stuff. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think what you got to say about them is that they're not afraid to try. So I mean, whenever anybody has a beef about that Lulu album, it's fine. But at least they're not afraid to try doing something like that. You know what I mean? I think it's much worse for your creativity if you're going to be a creative being the way they are, to be afraid, what if my fans don't like it? I mean, a lot may not like it. Maybe some will, but man, you took a swing with Lou Reed. I mean, you got to try stuff like that,
Sounds like they should write a song called "Of Whalin' Man" as like a part 2 to "Of Wolfen Man."
Well said. Well, they should do that. That would be.
Next time you speak to Lars, tell him that we're going to help him with the songwriting on that next song. Okay, "Of Whalin' Man."
I think it'd be great. That's good.
One of my favorites is the most recent is the Murder in the Front Row documentary. Mm-hmm. Superbly done.
Thank you.
The whole San Francisco thrash scene. Tell us a little bit about this.
So, again, this is my work. Murder in Front Row as a movie is my work. It's not sponsored by Metallica in any way, although they supported me greatly in it. And so here's what it was. In the course of work, number of the original fans, like there's a group of fans who were like original OG fans from San Francisco when the band migrated up the coast to San Francisco. And two of those fans, Brian Liu and Harold Oyman, made a book called Murder in the Front Row, lines that are taken from an Exodus song. And it's filled with photographs of the early Bay Area thrash scene. A lot of the photographs, I mean, there's a bunch of Metallica, but really it's pretty mixed with a lot of the other early metal bands, as even like Slayer and Megadeth, which were not Bay Area bands, but certainly found a willing audience in the Bay Area. And so there's a lot of great photographs of those guys coming through. And the Bay Area supported all that metal that came there and spawned a great deal of it. So a lot, you could definitely say the thrash metal scene certainly had a lot going for it in the Bay Area. So there was this book called Murder in the Front Row, and I basically, as a filmmaker, I fell in love with the book, and it's mostly a book of pictures, and I realized that there was a lot more to it than even was spoken about in the stories in the book. So I contacted Brian and Harold, and I told them. And they knew me at this point, but they did not just give me their story. They were like, I said, I'd like to make a film of it. And they first wanted to make sure that I was going to make it, in a way that honored the tradition of the Bay Area thrash. And by that, I mean, what we did was that we approached it something like this. There was a moment in time when, let's say, Metallica first went up to San Francisco, and this would be in the fall of spring and the fall of 1982, maybe it was fall 82. Anyway, that like James Hetfield was no more famous than the kid standing there watching it with him. You know what I mean? And they're the same age and they're rocking out together. And so we kind of approached it like that really as much a part of the story as any of the metal guys that you want to talk about. And so we took it from that very earliest period. And one of the great, I think, things that we managed to highlight was really the very powerful contribution of Kirk Hammett to the Bay Area thrash scene. Because you got to remember, Kirk Hammett formed Exodus even before Lars and James formed Metallica, and he's pursuing. It may not have been exactly a thrash band at the time, but he's helping create thrash in the Bay Area, and he doesn't even know who James and Lars are yet, and he's doing this. So it really, kind of showed that. And so I kind of, filmed the movie. I filmed all these interviews. I filmed a lot of interviews before Metallica sat for my cameras, but they did sit for my cameras over the course of a week, where they did a 3-night stand in Mexico City. And the picture on the left is me and my wife, Rochelle, who's also a producer on the movie, with our friend who is one of the very famous luchadors there and a huge fan of Metallica, and he got a little cameo in the movie. And it's really like kind of great. And we just one after another, it was so great that people honored us by sitting for our cameras. And so we have Tom Araya, who you see there. We filmed on it was towards the end of the they hadn't announced yet, but it was Slayer, was kind of in the tail end of Slayer's career. But they still sat for us. Gary Holt, Paul Bostaff at the time. In another interview, I was able to get, let me see, who else did we get there? We got Mustaine, we got Ellefson. So we really got a lot of the people that were part of this. And, kind of people, as we were filming, people were kind of hearing from the community, which keeps in touch in the thrash community, that we were like the good guys. We were telling the story the right way. We were honoring the fans. And so I think that was, got, and it's what you wish would happen. As always, you make a film, you don't know what the reception is going to be. You hope it's good. In this case, it was very good. The fan base really enjoyed the movie. I went to as many screenings as I could. We had a long theatrical run before the video run. And one of the amazing things, guys, was that there was people bringing their kids to the screenings of the movie because they were showing them the history. A lot of times had been in the thrash community. He may have cut his hair, he may have whatever, but he's still, that's where his heart is. And he's showing his son or daughter, this is what I was part of. And it's something, and it mattered. It's history, and it mattered. And that happens so many times I can't even count or tell you. And then there's like the younger fans who never were there for that, but like here they're watching like where this music was developed from. And then there's the OG fans like you guys who were there for a good piece of it. And they're like reliving a piece of their history with the film. So many amazing things. And it's great that, there should be more documents like this. I think there was a guy who I interviewed later. He's not in Murder in Front Row, but I did interview him for this Metallica project named Bob Nalbandian. And unfortunately, he passed away recently. But no greater lover of heavy metal than he. And he also had made a project of documenting a lot of this and putting together his documentaries. And it's nice to make a shout out to him now, but it's also nice that we need more people documenting this history. That's all. That's just something I'll state here.
I want to say really the star of this Murder in the Front Row isn't so much the bands and the footage. It's like you said, the owner of Ruthie's Inn, the girls that used to feed these guys, the lady that had the house and the people, if they didn't have anywhere to sleep, she would actually pay for stuff. It was everything. And you know what, Adam, what the really cool thing is, you mentioned what these people are doing now. The one gal is she works for the government. She's really a rocket scientist or something. It's just,
that was Paul Bailoff's girlfriend, and she became a nuclear scientist working on the nuclear weapons to protect our country. It's like, I mean, but I love showing that stuff. And you guys go back long enough. I mean, you remember how, and I'll say the metalheads were portrayed in the 80s, right? It was the PMRC, and we were all metal burnouts, and we were going to be like, devil worshippers, and we're a plague to society. Well, it's all these years later. Nobody's a plague to society. It's, it's like the Who said, the kids are all right, and because it's what they always were. They were, the smart kids. They were motivated. A lot of what comes out, I think metal now is just what it was then, which is there was a few people who said they had a tough childhood, with all kinds of rough situations in their childhood that we all know about, that, could be any number of things. And what was there for them? Metal, that metal community, and their friends that they could share that with and get them through those hard times.
Amen. All right. Well, you know what? We're going to let you get back to your vacation. You want to promote anything? Where can we people find out about your product?
I mean, nothing to promote right now. Just I mean, I would just say this: if anybody is interested in what we've talked about here, and they haven't seen Murder in the Front Row, and if you're at all interested in the history of thrash metal, then I just played the movie. I hadn't screened it in a while, but I went out there and supported it and did a talk. And, there's still a lot of people that haven't seen it. And it's, or people who are just coming into this thrash community and want to know the history. And I just think it stands as a kind of, a testament about that kind of music and what it was at that time, and so it'll always be there for that, to like welcome people into the community, just as the book will. And just as like when you create these podcasts, they're just going to be there.
Well, like yourself, we're always working, and this came into one of my inboxes today. And let me share this as we exit here. This is going back to 1983. Here's Metallica in Rochester, New York. Cliff Burton and James Hetfield at the Riverboat opening for Raven. Yeah. We got an exclusive picture here, and there's the master, Cliff Burton. Just amazing. Yeah. That's just some fun stuff. But
thank you. Yeah.
Adam, we're going to ask you just to stay on after we say goodbye. We have a question we want to ask you, and we will see you in Jersey, hopefully. And thank you for your time, man.
Rock on. Thank you.
Nice to talk to you, Adam. Maybe we'll see you at Wohops when John comes down. We'll drag him there at 2 a.m. What do you think?
No problem. All right. I'll see you in the parking lot. That's for sure.
Sounds good.
Metal for Life.
Thank you for listening to Metal Mayhem ROC. Check out our website at metalmayhemroc.com for information on podcasts, archives, links to all our live radio shows, and all sorts of info. Please like, follow, and share with everyone, even your non-metal friends. And always remember to keep it heavy.